Why is that? It's for that very reason. For example, if you had capital income rates disconnected from labour income rates, why would the labour income tax rate on labour income over $300,000 or more not rise to 50%, 80%, 90%, you mean France, before you know where you are? After the market adjusts to all this change, after all, only a few public servants will be paying the tax. The Governor of the Reserve Bank, Secretary of Treasury, and it would look nice. And it wouldn't cause too many problems because everybody would reallocate their income. You take away the straitjacket, and that's not a good thing. But it would produce an incoherent, ad hoc tax system, just like a GST at different rates. And that's what I oppose. So I have the plea. Keep our politicians under control. Keep the Douglas tax system. Now, Michael talked about the lack of investment and low GDP growth and entrepreneurial growth in New Zealand. Frankly, I don't think GDP growth and tax have much in common. If you look at North Korea and South Korea, are you really telling me that North Korea is a basket case and South Korea is one of the greatest economic success because of their tax systems? No. No right-thinking person could ever possibly believe that. It's all about property rights and incentives. And within normal tax systems, the tax system, and the economists drive me mad, always wanting to fiddle around with the bloody tax system to make the economy grow. I mean, do your job, make it grow and leave our tax system alone. At the end of the day, if you're concerned about the level of tax on capital income, and that may be some point, just increase GST and reduce all income tax rates. That alters the balance between labour and capital income, puts more of the thing onto labour income. People understand it, they don't feel aggrieved, they don't feel that the rich person is getting away with it, and just simply reduce all income tax rates. It's easy, simple and obvious. Thank you.
Supposed to be consistent, I should say. Thank you, Michael. Delighted to see somebody entering into the spirit of the Oxford Union style of debate. I should mention, or perhaps I should have mentioned at the start, that we have invited the speakers in all the debates to present the views from the two extremes, regardless of their personal views. And so it's good to hear. I don't know whether it's their... Welcome to the extreme real world of Robin Oliver. Thank you, Robin. Well, to tell us whether Robin's given us a sense of reality or not, John Creddy has the difficult task of adjudicating between our two protagonists.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure adjudication is my role here, because Norman actually asked us to take the role of a judge advising the jury. So I'm going to take that as license to criticise both our speakers without having to say anything substantive myself. What I really want to talk about is how do we assess these arguments? Robin and Michael have given us incredibly different types of argument. Robin's with more humour and rhetoric, maybe, but they're certainly coming from different views. How do we weigh those arguments? So in other words, I want to sort the rational from the rhetoric, or try and sort the rational from the rhetoric, because it's in the speaker's interest to conceal the rational and raise the rhetoric. So I'm going to go in the opposite direction. Why do economists, and particularly people talking about tax, why do they disagree? Well, the first reason they disagree is they have different ultimate aims, different value judgments. They're going to very different places. But they haven't really told us what their ultimate aims are. They've told us what they think the tax system should look like, but they haven't really told us precisely what their values are. At least you have to look hard for them. Let's take Robin's case. Robin appears to take the basic argument that the tax base should be comprehensive income. And as we know, comprehensive income is an accretion concept. It says that we measure income by the additional purchasing power you have in a given period without reducing your wealth. Of course, how do we define wealth is usually brushed over in these kind of things, and it raises a whole lot of issues. But that is a value judgment. It's not an absolute in any sense. So Robin hasn't really told us why we should take an accretion concept, it seems to me. He's taken standard tax criteria plus intuition. Well, I never trust my intuition. And if someone tells me it's intuitively obvious, I start to think, well, they're concealing their argument somewhat. Robin uses the basic arguments about equity. He actually talked about vertical equity, but I think what he meant was horizontal equity. So people in similar circumstances should be treated similarly. I don't think the argument really has much to do with vertical equity. And he sees alignment as a good in itself. That's part of his ultimate objective. And he tells us that's good because it imposes a constraint on policy choices, as if there weren't other constraints that we could impose on policy choices. So I'll leave you to think about those ultimate objectives behind those arguments. Michael is a bit more elusive, perhaps, about what he's aiming for. The statement that I found clearest to an aim was that we should have a tax system that produces the highest possible material living standards for the economy as a whole. We could spend days working out what he means by that. I don't really know what that means. He's a macroeconomist. So macroeconomists are much more comfortable with things like the economy as a whole. I struggle. What are the policy options here? Robin has told us quite explicitly, if we're going to propose one tax change somewhere, then that's really an incomplete policy if we don't say how we're going to raise the additional revenue. So his argument proceeds along the lines, well, if you're going to cut a vast amount of revenue from capital income taxes, you've got to raise it elsewhere, and raising income tax rates is going to have all its adverse incentive effects and particularly efficiency effects. If we're concerned about raising those high rates, Robin says we should raise GST, and it's not a tax on capital, which is intuitively obvious, isn't it, as Robin tells us, but actually it's not intuitively obvious to me. When capital income is spent, of course, it attracts GST. It's only when it's not spent that it doesn't attract any GST. So the idea that GST is a tax only on labour income is somewhat strange to my view. You get another chance. I only get one. Okay. Michael explicitly ignores this idea of revenue neutrality. So he tells us he doesn't have to worry about that. And of course, that's quite worrying because it means there's a whole range of policies that he doesn't have to talk about and justify. So I would ask you to think about that one before you vote. I was a little bit frightened by mention of inheritance tax. Land tax, maybe. Other people might jump up and down following. Now, another reason why economists disagree is that they have very different views of the world. In other words, they have different kind of models, different judgments about orders of magnitude involved. So where do our two speakers lie in this kind of dimension? Robin takes sort of public finance economist view. Tax policy should be dominated by standard criteria. And he talks about these micro criteria and about the need to keep distortions at a minimum. there's a somewhat, can I say, disingenuous reference to a Harburger, what I call Marshallian, because I'm originally from England, triangles, and the allusion to the Ramsey tax result, which of course is nothing to do with an economy. Ramsey's result is a one-person model, so it doesn't apply at all. The idea that if you believed in minimizing distortions, you wouldn't have a uniform GST is beside the point, I would argue. Coherence and intuition. It's intuitively obvious that we should have a coherent system that has alignment between the rates. Is that a substantive argument? I'll leave that to you to judge. There's a fair bit of rhetoric there, isn't there? Michael argues that capital taxes are at the heart of the reason for the decline in New Zealand's productivity growth, and he showed us a diagram with declining productivity growth. But he failed to say that over that period, capital taxes have actually generally fallen quite a lot. And so we'd really like to know, why is it that those falls over the period have not had any effect on the decline, when his basic argument is that we want to cut those in order to reverse that decline. So I think we've been shown a rather partial picture to try and convince us that capital taxes have caused this productivity decline. And we're told that the reduction in capital tax would raise entrepreneurship, which is what New Zealand needs. Now, we know there's lots of arguments about risk-taking, entrepreneurship, and taxes. Michael didn't allude to that. It seems to me something of an article of faith that we're going to get lots more entrepreneurs being active in New Zealand as a result of dropping the capital income tax. I said I have this license to be really negative, so I'm really warning you about some of the arguments before you vote. I thought it was astonishing that Michael doesn't think there are any rents to be earned in New Zealand. He doesn't think that we have monopolistic markets where foreign direct investment is concerned, but he thinks that dropping these capital income tax would provide a sudden inrush of banking to increase banks to increase competition. I'm not doing Robin's job here. I'm being fair, I hope. The central question, it seems to me, really important here, is how mobile are capital and labour. These are absolutely crucial to the argument about lower capital tax rates and the Nordic model. Robin has argued that claims regarding high mobility of capital are exaggerated. He's argued that labour is highly mobile, and so we shouldn't place too much emphasis on this capital mobility argument. Although we had to take it as an article of faith that he was right here. He didn't really show us any evidence. Michael tells us capital is highly mobile and was rather dismissive of the view that there are economic rents obtained by foreign direct investment. High labour mobility, Michael argued, is not influenced by income taxation. Of course, it's true that considerable amount of mobility is not itself a proof that it's influenced by taxation. But again, Michael seemed to take the view that there aren't really high disincentive effects of income taxes anyway, so we can drop capital taxes and raise labour income taxes without really much cost. Do you really believe that? Again, we weren't shown any evidence, we weren't told about evidence here. So I would say there are a number of issues here. Be careful before you vote. I will say we have to be careful. It's very easy to use some rhetoric and draw on economic theory. I've mentioned Robin's use of Ramsey taxation, which I think is beside the point in this context. Michael has told us that there are theories that go back a long way to tell us that optimal capital taxes should be zero. He didn't tell us that there are also theories that the optimal indirect tax is zero. He didn't tell us that there are theories that the optimal income tax rate on the highest income is zero. Reason for that is that we, as economists, know these theories are around, but we know also that they're pretty useless when it comes to policy recommendations. So think carefully is my recommendation.